So, a little over a year ago, I was working the overnight shift at this gas station near my house. Yeah, I know. Graveyard shift, alone, as a woman. People always say that's unsafe, but honestly, it wasn't that bad. The store was super slow, like 30 customers in 8 hours on a busy night, and the sheriff's office was literally across the street, maybe 20 feet away. I figured if anything sketchy happened, help wasn't far. So, it's about 3:30 in the morning, and I decide to step outside for a cigarette. You know, multitask, check the trash, sweep the parking lot, take a quick break. I had one headphone in, jamming out, trying to get through the last few hours of my shift. That's when I saw him. Across the road, in the sheriff's office parking lot, there's this guy. He's facing away from me, swaying back and forth, head down like, I don't know. At first, I thought he was just relieving himself. I mean, really? Against the sheriff's office? Bold move, man. Sure, the building closes at 4 p.m. and doesn't open again till 6 a.m., but still. And then it clicked. It was the same guy who'd come into the store earlier that night, around 11:30. I remembered his ripped white t-shirt and the fact that he gave me total creep vibes when he came in. He was definitely buzzed back then. And now? Oh, he was gone. I didn't say anything. Didn't look his way for too long. I was doing the whole, don't draw attention to yourself thing. It was working fine. Until a car pulled into the lot. As this customer was leaving, I walked her out, you know, to be polite. I still had half a cigarette left, and my dustpan and squeegee were sitting outside. That's when we both heard him. He was swearing, loudly, and like, arguing with himself. The customer looked over at him, then at me, and said, be careful, okay? I tried to make light of it like, pfft, he should be the one afraid of me. You know, something awkward and tough sounding. But at this point, the guy had moved. He was closer to the road now and facing the parking lot, like he was staring right at the store. He's still swaying, still yelling, but whatever he's saying doesn't make any sense. Just this angry, drunken mess of words. I didn't engage him. I didn't say a word, but I didn't take my eyes off him either. Something about him, it just bothered me. His face, there was this darkness to it, and his eyes looked wild. You know what I mean? Like crazy eyes. And let me tell you something. When you work overnight shifts, you learn the crazy-eyed ones are the worst ones to deal with. I didn't want anything to do with him, so I just kept my head down and walked back into the store. Slowly, like I didn't care. But inside, I was freaked out. I still had almost 3 hours left on my shift, and 2 more hours until anyone else showed up to work. The guy hadn't come over. Yet. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. So, as soon as I got back inside, I went straight to the computer. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't about to take any chances. I quickly typed up a temporarily closed sign. Figured I'd slap it on the door if things went sideways. I didn't know if this guy wanted trouble, but I was going to be ready. As I came around the counter, heading toward the doors to get them locked, I looked up and saw him. He was already crossing the road, stumbling his way toward my side of the parking lot. I barely got the second door locked when he made it into the lot. I panicked for a second, but pulled it together and gave him the universal nope signal, slashing my hand across my neck and shaking my head. Like, sorry, buddy, we're closed. Not happening. He stopped, looked at me for a moment, and then started walking away. But as he turned, he started screaming. And I don't mean he was annoyed or yelling something like, "Hey, screw you!" No, this was different. This guy was full on, enraged, screaming at the top of his lungs. He was flailing his arms, throwing his hands everywhere, just completely losing it. That's when it hit me. I was definitely in the wrong shift, at the wrong job. I felt that sick, creepy feeling you get when you know something's about to go sideways. So I grabbed the phone and called the cops. It's a good thing I did because literally, the second I hung up, there he was again, back at the doors. This time, he was pulling on the handles, banging on the glass. Then he backed up, stumbled a bit, and tried to ram the door, like full-on charging at it. Thankfully, the doors were thick glass, and there was no way he was getting through, but I was still freaked out. My brain went into fight mode, and I made a mistake. I yelled at him through the glass. "I called the cops! Your ass is about to be grass!" Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. The second those words left my mouth, he stopped, looked at me, and then took off running. The cops got there pretty quick, and they searched the area, drove around the road, the neighborhoods, the back alleys, for over an hour. Nothing. He was on foot, so where the hell did he go? It's like he vanished into thin air. And because he didn't actually hurt me or damage anything, I didn't fill out a police report. I was still safe behind those thick, locked glass doors for the rest of my shift, but man, I was on edge. That guy didn't come back, but I spent the next 3 months looking over my shoulder at that job. Every time a shadow moved outside, every time someone walked up to the door late at night, I wondered if it was him. Maybe if I hadn't warned him about the cops, they would have found him. Maybe not. I'll never know if I made the right call. What I do know is that I'm glad I don't work there anymore. A couple of years ago, one of my closest friends moved across the country to LA with his long-term girlfriend for this amazing job opportunity. Only issue? He refused to fly his dogs out with him. He didn't want to stress them out, especially since they'd be living in a hotel for the first month. Fair enough. Fast forward a few weeks, and my buddy finally found a place to rent. At this point, he's really missing his dogs. So, he calls in a favor. Me, his sister, and another friend. He asks us to drive the dogs from Chicago to LA. Now it's a long trip, close to 30 hours. But with 3 people sharing the load, we figured we could pull it off pretty easily. We left early and planned to drive long hours to stay on schedule. At some point along the way, my friend and I decided we'd take on most of the driving ourselves and let his sister take over if we really needed a break. Time was tight because of some hiccup with his rental agreement, so we didn't have the luxury of sightseeing. Just a quick 8-hour stop at a La Quinta in Denver, and we were back on the road. For the most part, the trip was smooth. The only real hiccup came when we got pulled over right before Utah for, get this, driving in the left lane of an empty highway for 2 miles. Whoops, lesson learned. From there, we cruised through Utah, Arizona, and Nevada without a problem. That is, until we hit California, running dangerously low on gas. I'd been driving for most of the day and tagged my buddy in to take over after we got pulled over. I stayed in the passenger seat, playing navigator, scanning for the nearest gas station on the GPS. That's when we saw it. A sign for something called Yermo Ghost Town, or something along those lines. It had a mobile station, and it was right off the interstate. Perfect. By the time we rolled in, we were running on fumes. Barely made it. Normally, we'd let the dogs out to stretch their legs every time we stopped, but they were both snuggled up in the back, fast asleep. so I figured I'd just hop out, pump the gas, and keep it quick. We pulled up to a pump next to this beat-up green sedan, and there was this short, plump guy who just turned around and was walking toward the station. Nothing too weird, right? There were a handful of other cars at the pumps, old, beat-up ones, but no one seemed to be in them. I figured they must belong to people inside. A couple more cars were parked up near the building, probably employees' cars, so everything seemed fine. At first, I swiped my credit card. The pump beeped and spit out an error. Card not accepted. Annoyed, I swiped again. This time it says, "Please see attendant." Now I'm even more annoyed, but we need the gas, so what can you do? I tap on the window to let my buddy know I'm heading inside, ask if anyone wants anything. They throw out some orders, Gatorade and Marlboro Reds, and I start walking toward the station. That's when things started to feel off. For starters, it was weirdly quiet. I mean, this place is right off the interstate. You'd expect a little noise, some cars coming and going, people milling around. But no, dead quiet. And then I stepped inside. Immediately, I noticed something strange. There were boxes of chips just sitting on the floor, like someone had started stocking the shelves and just stopped mid-shift. I took a few steps in and looked around. The place was empty. No customers. No employees. Nothing. Now, I'm starting to feel uneasy. There were at least 6 cars parked outside besides ours. Where was everyone? And then it hit me. What about the guy in the green sedan? I saw him walking toward the station right as I pulled up. Where the hell did he go? Surely, everyone can't be in the bathroom, right? So, at this point, I'm standing in the middle of this completely empty gas station, and this gnawing feeling hits me. You know that gut instinct that tells you something's really wrong? Yeah, that was screaming at me. Every fiber of my being was like, get out now. But I didn't want to look like a total lunatic running out of an empty gas station for no reason. I told myself to play it cool, natural. Don't let my body language give away how badly I was freaking out inside. I was probably only in there for like 2 minutes, but it felt way longer. Before I walked out, I stopped at the door for a second and listened, just in case. I was hoping to hear something. A toilet flushing. Someone shuffling around in the aisles. Anything to explain where everyone was. Nothing. It was dead silent. When I stepped back outside and saw the car, that's when the dread really kicked in. You know those moments in horror movies where everything gets quiet right before something awful happens? Yeah, it felt exactly like that. I'm about 25 yards from the car, walking fast, when I see him. From around the corner of the building, this guy steps out. Not the short, plump guy from earlier. This was someone else entirely. He was bigger, and his expression, I don't even know how to describe it. You know that creepy Nick Cage smile in Face Off? The one that's unsettling for no reason? Yeah, that. He locked eyes with me, and as soon as I turned back to check, he started walking toward me. Not casually. He was walking with purpose. I didn't stick around to find out what he wanted. Nope. I booked it straight for the car, trying not to outright sprint, but definitely picking up the pace. And of course, because the universe hates me, my friend had the car doors locked. I get to the car, banging on the window, full on panicking now. And what does my buddy do? Rolls the window down half an inch. Half an inch. He's just chilling, completely clueless, and tells me, "The dog's in your seat. We didn't want her jumping out when you opened the door. I'm not in the mood for this. I reached my arm in, grabbed our 95-pound golden retriever, and threw her into the back seat. At this point, my friend finally realized something was up because he looked at me like, "Oh shit." I'm shouting, "Unlock the door and drive, man." Finally, he starts the car, and we peel out of there. As we're pulling away, I look back. The guy, Nick Cage smiley guy, had stopped about a pump away from where we'd been parked. He was just standing there, staring at us with that same unnerving smile. We found another gas station further down the road, and this one was packed. Tons of people inside and out, which was a huge relief. As I pumped gas, I told my friends what had happened, and they were just staring at me like, "Are you serious?" We eventually got back on the interstate, but here's the kicker. About 15 minutes later, we had to pass that gas station again. As we drove by, we all went completely silent. Those same cars, the ones we saw earlier, they were still there. Same spots, same positions. It was like no one had moved an inch. At that point, we were thoroughly freaked out. And then, just to put the cherry on top of this creepy sundae, I get a call from my credit card company. There was a $100 charge from that mobile station. Of course. The woman on the phone was super helpful. She fixed the issue right away. But even she was like, "That's really weird." In the end, we made it to LA, had an awesome vacation, and all was good. But to this day, I still wonder what the hell was going on at that gas station, and what was up with that smiling guy. About 7 years ago, when I was 17, my parents went out of town for the weekend and left me home alone. This wasn't unusual. They trusted me, and I was pretty responsible. Normally, though, I wouldn't actually stay home alone. I mean, their house is creepy even during the day. It's in a small, rural town where everyone knows everyone, and while it's generally super quiet and safe, being alone in that house was not my idea of fun. That Saturday, I had plans to stay with a friend, but of course, at the last minute, her parents decided I couldn't. They were like that sometimes, randomly weird about having company over, and while I wasn't thrilled, I wasn't surprised either. So, around 9:30 or 9:45, I grabbed my stuff and headed out. The drive home was only about 15 minutes, but as I was driving, I got this weird feeling. You know when you just get that gut instinct that something's off, even though you can't explain it? Yeah, it was like that. I just knew I didn't want to stay alone at my parents' house that night. I called my brother to see if I could crash at his place. At the time, he was living with his girlfriend, who had a small kid, so I wasn't sure if it'd be cool. But instead of me staying there, he offered to come stay with me instead. His reasoning? Their dog would go nuts if I tried to sneak into the house, and it would just be easier this way. He told me he'd be at our parents' house in 20 minutes. Oh, and a quick side note that's important for later. My brother's not someone people mess with. He's 6'3", about 200 pounds, covered in tattoos, and generally just has that scary look about him. Anyway, I figured I'd kill some time so he'd already be there when I got home. I pulled into a gas station to grab a snack. Small town life. There's not much else to do. It was quiet, like always, with just a few cars parked in the lot. Everything in this town shuts down by 8 p.m., so nothing about it seemed unusual. I parked, got out, and headed toward the door. There was a man standing just outside smoking. He didn't say anything, just held the door open for me. Standard Southern hospitality, honestly, especially when you're a woman. I smiled, said thank you, and went inside. That's when things started to feel off. As soon as I stepped in, I noticed another man standing by the door. And let me tell you, he was staring at me. Not the casual glance you get from strangers. The full-on, gross, up-and-down look that makes your skin crawl. He smirked and said something like, "Hey, sexy, what are you doing alone?" Instantly, I got that ugh feeling in my stomach. Creepy as hell. I ignored him and kept walking toward the back of the store to grab my snacks. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. Guys like this, at least around here, talk a big game but rarely back it up. He was probably drunk, high, or just being a regular asshole. Either way, I wasn't about to engage. But as I walked away, he yelled after me, called me a bitch. I still ignored him. I just wanted to get my snacks, pay, and leave. That's it. I grabbed what I needed, headed up to the counter, paid, and didn't look back. But let me tell you, I was already starting to regret stopping there. So, I walked back out of the gas station, and to my relief, both guys were gone. Thank God, right? I didn't want to deal with any more catcalling or weird vibes. My car was parked about 100 feet away, so I started walking across the lot, totally focused on my phone to check if enough time had passed for my brother to be at the house. When I looked up, though, there he was. The same guy who'd been harassing me earlier was now standing at the gas pumps, just staring at me. I locked eyes with him for a second and kept walking, ignoring him. But then he called out, "Hey, you know you're supposed to answer a man when he speaks to you." I stopped for a second, annoyed, and shot back something sarcastic. I don't even remember what I said, but clearly it pissed him off. I got in my car, locked the doors immediately, and started it. My only thought was, screw this, I'm going home, eating my snacks, and hanging out with my brother. That's when I noticed something weird. I put my car in gear and looked around, and he was gone. I scanned the lot, and that's when I saw them. Both guys, the door holder and his creepy buddy, were sitting in a car parked directly across from mine. They were just staring at me, talking to each other, pointing at me every now and then. At this point, I was pissed, but I wasn't going to let them think they scared me. I stared right back at them, all defiant like, "Yeah, what's up?" That's when the guy who held the door smiled at me. And then, oh, this is the part that really freaked me out. He did the whole finger across the throat gesture. You know, like, "You're dead." What a psycho. I rolled my eyes. Classic move when you're pretending you're not scared. And pulled out of the lot, hoping they'd just let it go. Nope. I barely got down the road when I saw them pull out behind me. Now, I wasn't scared at first because, like I said, most guys around here are just talk. They don't actually do anything. But just to be sure, I decided to take a few back roads that loop around in a circle to see if they were actually following me. Yeah, they were. When they realized I was testing them, they sped up and got right on my bumper. I couldn't even see their headlights. They were so close. Then they started laying on their horn, like full-on blaring it. At that point, I was like, okay, now I'm scared. I called my brother immediately. I explained what was happening, and he didn't even hesitate. "Come home," he said. "I'll handle it." So, I started driving toward my parents' house. I was only 3-4 minutes away, but those guys stayed right on me, still honking like maniacs. I was shaking the whole way, but trying to keep it together because I knew my brother was there. When I finally slowed down to pull into the driveway, I almost cried with relief. At the end of the driveway, standing there like a scene straight out of a movie, was my brother. Shirtless, shoulders back, hands crossed over his stomach, clearly holding a pistol, and his pit bull, who looks just as intimidating as he does, was sitting perfectly still right next to him. I didn't even slow down. I drove straight around him and into the yard. The two guys started to pull in behind me, but as soon as they saw my brother standing there like a badass, they slammed on their brakes, backed up, and peeled out of there as fast as they could. Honestly, I have no idea what those guys would have done if I'd stopped somewhere alone, or if I'd kept driving aimlessly. But I'll never forget the way my brother looked that night. It's burned into my memory in the best way. Standing there, ready to protect me, with his pit bull by his side, like something straight out of an action movie. I'll always be thankful he was there.